Today we're looking at a complex number. A complex number is this. Complex number. It's a number of the form a plus bi, where a and b are real numbers and it looks like this. So if I have a plus bi plus c plus di, I'm going to have something that looks like a plus c plus b plus d I. Okay, and this is sum of complex numbers. Okay, so this is what we have. We have two pieces. I have a real piece, I have an imaginary piece. B is a real number, but because it's with this I, it is considered the imaginary portion of this complex number. So there's a real portion and an imaginary portion. So there would be like a real person like me plus SpongeBob, right? We can't enter each other's worlds. I can't go into SpongeBob's world. SpongeBob can't come into my world. Right? Right? Okay. So this is the addition property. Now this is all looks really complicated, but it's really not. So the deal is you can add the real components, and then you can add the imaginary components, and that's all you're doing basically. So here's an example. So I have 4 minus 2i plus 3 minus 3i plus negative 4 plus 7i. And the deal with this is that we can add all of the real pieces together. So I can take this 4, what I would have is, I would have 4 plus 3 minus 4, and that's that real portion. And then with that, I would have negative 2 minus 3 plus 7, and all that, sorry, that should be black, is going to be multiplied by I, and that's a negative. That's terrible. Let me fix it. Should be negative. There we go. So it would look like that. When I add them together, what I end up with is 3, right? Those 4's cancel out. So I have 3. And over here I have a negative 2 and negative 3. That gives me negative 5 plus 7 is 2. So I would have plus 2i. And we can't combine these. So make sure you know this can't be combined. Okay, there's a real world, imaginary world. They're separated. They can't enter each other's worlds. So do not combine. Okay. Good, that's our first one. That was all addition. Okay, I'm going to switch over to some subtraction. So go ahead, pause the video if you need to, get these notes down. Okay, here's our next example. It's of subtraction. Okay, so here's an example, and those are in order, remember, examples. And this is of subtraction. Last one we did was of addition. So here we go again. Let's see if I can get all these colors in my hand. We have 3 minus 2i minus 2 minus 3i. Alright, so subtraction here. Now, the difference between this one is that I have subtraction, and you might suspect that you're going to distribute that negative sign through the parentheses, and yes, that is what you're going to do. So distribute that negative sign through the parentheses. Distribute negative. Okay, so make sure you do that. Distribute the negative sign. Okay, so what I'm going to end up with then is I'm going to have 3 minus 2i. I'm going to distribute this through. So I'm going to have plus negative 2 plus 3i. Okay, so I distributed it through. Once I do that, and then I'm just combining the real and imaginary terms. So my real terms, I have 3 plus a negative 2. That's going to give me 1. And for my imaginaries, I have a negative 2i plus 3i, so that's going to give me plus 1i, or just I. And that's my answer. Okay, do not combine 2 different worlds. Do not combine. Okay, get those notes down, and then we'll move on. Pause the video if you need to. The next one we're going to do is multiplication. So here's an example of multiplication. And it's the same process as multiplying binomials. Okay, same process as multiplying binomials. Some of us, or some of you guys use FOIL, so there's just a little reminder. But, so, you know, it's a distributive property, right? So here we go. So this is what I would have. Throwing my pins around. 2 plus 5i times 3 minus 2i. So it's the same thing as FOIL, but you have to remember those 2 things that I told you. Remember, actually I only need one of them, that I squared equals -1, so that's going to come in here. I'm going to multiply those 2 together, so I'm going to have 2 times 3 plus, I'm going to multiply the outsides together, so that's going to give me 2 times -2i plus, I'm going to multiply the insides together, so I'll have 3 times 5i plus I'm going to multiply the outsides together, and I will have 5i times negative 2i. Okay? So what I end up with is 6 plus, let's do it that way, negative 4i plus 15i plus 5 times negative 2 is negative 10i squared. Well, remember what I was telling you. I mean, if you have an I squared, you need to switch it over to 1. So here's that kind of that little bubbly thought, right? Your thoughts. And I squared equals negative 1. So replace I squared with negative 1. So you're going to go through here. You're going to rewrite. Here we go. Are you going to take all these steps? Yeah, you should, but possibly you're not going to. You're going to combine like terms at this point. I'm going to multiply by negative 1 now instead of that I squared, so I've replaced it. Okay, so replacing it. What I get, and I'm going to combine like terms. I don't think I will. 6 plus negative 4i plus 15i. Negative 10, negative 1 is a positive 10. So at this point, I'm now going to combine like terms. So this is like the 10. These two are like because they have i's. So I have 16 plus 11i, and that's my answer. And remember, don't combine those. They don't get combined. Okay, write those notes down. Pause the video if you need to, and we'll go on. A couple more, 3 more, I think. Okay, the next example is multiply it's this one. I'm still doing multiplication, sorry. So 3i times 2i minus 1. Now these are, it's backward, it's written backward. I'm just switching the 3i over to some color so we can make sure we can see what's happening here. So 3i I'm going to switch over, just doing a rewrite there. And this whole thing is going to be squared, so I'm squaring the parentheses only, right? Okay, so when you solve these, multiply those that complex number squared, do that first. Okay, so that's going to be first. So here's one of our steps, and we do our steps in blue. So what I really have then is 3i times 2i minus 1 times 2i minus 1, right? I'm going to go ahead and FOIL that. This 3i is just going to wait until I'm done. Okay, once I'm done with the 2i minus I squared, then I'll distribute through with that 3i. So what I'm going to have then is these two multiplied together, so I have a 2i times 2i. The outside is going to give me plus negative 1 times 2i. And on the inside, I'm going to get plus negative 1 times 2i. And then I'm going to go on the outside here, or last, I guess, and FOIL is last. I don't do FOIL, really. I just distribute, but I know it's last. Is going to be plus negative 1 times negative 1. Okay. So I distributed everything, or I did FOIL, and now I'm just going to simplify this stuff. I forgot a parenthesis. So I have 3i times 4i squared minus 2i minus 2i plus 1. Okay, and then we have that little bubble thought about that I squared. So here it is. We know that I squared equals -1, so we're going to replace I squared with -1. So I'm going to rewrite this as this 3I times 4 times -1. I'm going to slip that right in there. So minus 2I plus 1. Okay. And what I'm going to end up with here is a -4. But it's going to turn blue, right? And my real numbers are in blue, so 4 times -1 is now a -4, and it's now in blue. I'm going to combine like terms, so this term and this term are now like, and these two terms are like. What I have is 3I times -4 and a +1 is going to give me a -3. And a -2I and a -2I is going to give me a -4I. All right, so now I'm left with just this, should be black. I'm left with just this, and I'm going to distribute in this 3I. So distributing, then I have 3I times -3, and I'm going to distribute over to that 4. So I'll have plus 3I times -4I. What happens is this is going to go into an imaginary number. I'm going to have -3 times 3 is a -9I. And what happens here is I'm going to have plus -12I squared. But then we have to go looking in that bubble that we have, and we just had that bubble right here, I squared equals -1. So I'm going to replace that with a -1. What I end up with is -9I plus, it's going to turn real, -12 times my -1. Okay, so now we have a real number. In the end, I have -9I plus 12. Now, when we write a complex number, we put the real portion first and the imaginary portion second. Okay, so real first, imaginary second, because it takes a real person to actually have an imaginary person, right? Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this, and it's going to be 12 minus 9I, and that is my answer. Looks like a lot of work. Probably some of these steps could be combined, okay? But for teaching purposes, I'm going to show you every last step. All right, pause the video if you need to, and get the rest of the notes down. Next thing we're going to look at is quotient of two complex numbers. Okay, quotient of two complex numbers. So this is where it gets a little tricky, but you guys were doing pretty good on those radicals, so I think you're going to be okay on these too. So we have 4 minus 3I all over 2 minus 4I. And you know that you can't have an I in the denominator, right? Well, what are you going to multiply by? Yes, the conjugate. So we're going to multiply by 1 actually. It's a special one. It's made up of the conjugate. So our special one that we're going to multiply by then would be 2 plus 4i, 2 plus 4i. Okay, so what that means is I'm going to have to multiply these two together on the top and multiply these two together on the bottom. But what's nice about the bottom is that it's going to end up being just a real number, okay, which is what we need. So on the top, as I'm multiplying, I'm not going to multiply it out all nicely for you. I'm just going to actually get to it because you know how to do it. Minus 6i plus 16i minus 12i squared is on the top, and on the bottom I have 4 minus 8i plus 8i minus 16i squared. Okay, so here's your steps. So number 1, multiply by conjugate. The second thing I'm going to do is replace okay, pause video, take your notes, and one more little piece and you're done. Okay, so this one is find the reciprocal, which sounds really simple, right? Sorry. Okay, so they want you to find the reciprocal of 4 plus I. Well, a reciprocal, and we're going to put this in like a little thought bubble here because we're just kind of thinking back. A reciprocal of, let's say, 3/4 would be 4/3, right? So we flip it. Well, you can't flip this in pieces. You have to flip it all together. So if I have 4 plus I, it's over 1. And when I flip this, I have 1 over 4 plus I. And that's the reciprocal. But you notice there's a problem with that reciprocal because it has an I in the denominator, and you can't have an I in the denominator. So that's what makes these a little more difficult. So what are you going to do? Well, yeah, you know, I'm just going to multiply by that. I'm going to multiply by 1. It's going to be a special one. It's the one that's going to give me a real number in the denominator, so it's going to be the conjugate of 4 plus I, so it would be 4 minus I, top and bottom. Remember, we're just multiplying by 1. It's my manipulation number, so it's okay. Okay, so on the top, I'm going to end up with 4 minus I. On the bottom, though, I get, let's walk through it, 4 times 4 is 16. And then I get, so that was the top. Here's my bottom pieces. I have plus 4I. I have, oh, I'm sorry, that would be a minus, wouldn't it, on that one? Sorry, oops, back up. My next one, though, is plus 4I. And then my last one is minus I squared. And what do we do with I squared? Oh, that's right, I squared equals -1. So I'm going to replace it. I'm going to take that and I'm going to give it a -1. But I already had a negative there. So that's actually going to go to this whole thing is going to end up being a positive 1. There we go. Okay, a positive 1. Now, these two terms, when you combine them, go away. And that's why we multiply by the conjugate. So they go away. So we don't have to worry about these. So now I have a 16 plus 1. So I have 4 minus I all over 17, just like that. Now, that denominator, of course, like I just told you, it kind of combines. I just looked at my wall and saw 3 signs now. Yes, okay. The sign that I saw in class today. that's been up for 2 weeks. Yeah, I just noticed 3 of them. All right, this is going to change over. It has to be split because the 17 actually combines it to where you have a real and imaginary that are kind of combined, and we don't want that. We want separate pieces. So we'll have 4 over 17 minus 1 over 17i, and then that is my reciprocal of 4 plus I. They look completely different, and it's all because you can't have the I in that denominator. So that is it. Let's see, let's write some, I always forget these. Here's some steps here. Write as 1 over the complex number. Oh no, sorry.
Attention on campus, will Justin Castillo please report to the receptionist office? Justin Castillo to the receptionist office.
Okay, I just had an announcement and it was super loud, so I cut it out of your film. All right, so number 2, multiply the denominator by the conjugate. Gate. Okay, you're not multiplying by the conjugate, you're multiplying by 1, but it's the 1 that's the conjugate. Okay, so multiply by conjugate. You know that. Multiply by 1. It's that special one, which is the conjugate. Whatever. You know what I'm talking about. All right, number 3, replace I squared with -1. Number 4, if you have a denominator left over, then split it. Okay, and then you have to simplify it a little bit. So anyway, there are your notes. That's everything. Good luck. We'll do some work in class on whatever day you come in. Bye.